It's the 1930s. Britain's falling behind. Air power was changing warfare, but the Royal Air Force was hell-bent on flying biplanes, fabric-covered relics of the First World War. This is where R.J. Mitchell comes into play. Mitchell wasn't designing an icon. He just wanted speed. Nothing but speed. This is where the Spitfire was created. Before the Spitfire came a lot of similar aircraft. A lot of his prototypes and his previous aircraft were seaplanes, designed for racing, so you expect that for him to produce a fighter plane is just out of it. But no, lots of companies did. And a fighter plane he did produce. One of the best of all time. And what let him do it was one thing: the elliptical wing. It wasn't just a beautiful wing, it was efficient. It reduced drag, improved lift, and allowed it even weight across heavy armaments, going up to 20mm cannons that were equipped on later Spitfires. This plane was different. At first, the Spitfire was unproven. Elegant, yes, but unproven. It was a fighter without warfare. And it was expensive. Very, very expensive. Some RAF leaders simply thought it was a bad idea. The Hurricane was better. It was more conventional. It was built of fabric dope and metal elements. It had a standard canopy. But the Spitfire was known. It was evident to them by 1939 that the Spitfire was needed. And by that summer, squadrons of Spitfires were stood ready across airfields all down England, polished aluminum skin hiding a secret weapon: the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. This engine didn't just provide speed, it provided hope. Then we come to summer of 1940. France has fallen. The Luftwaffe finally turns its attention to us. Britain stands alone. The Spitfire's greatest enemy was the Luftwaffe's key weapon at the time, the Messerschmitt 109. The match was close, very close. The Bf-109 could dive faster, but the Spitfire could turn tighter. Dogfights became spirals of smoke and fire, life or death decided in simply seconds. And while the Hurricane did shoot down more enemy planes, it was the Spitfire that took on the Luftwaffe's best. Churchill would go on to say, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." The Spitfire was the face of the few. War doesn't stand still, and neither did the Spitfire. As German fighters improved, so did Britain's answer. Mark after mark rolled off the production line. First, it was the Mark I, then it was the Mark V, then the Mark IX, then it was the Mark XIV, and last but not least, it was the Mark 24. But you'll notice all of these aircraft have something in common: the elliptical wing. That design never changed throughout the war. Yes, the wing adapted, but it remained the same shape. That was the key to the Spitfire. However, something did change. The Mark XIV. It gave way to something quite special, very, very new in its time. This gave it its longer nose and its more pronounced bumps. And that was the Griffin engine, 2,000 horsepower of pure speed. It could climb faster, fly higher, and hit harder than anything Mitchell could ever have imagined. But they still kept that same unmistakable elliptical wing. Spitfire wasn't just a British icon. It flew over North Africa, Italy, the Eastern Front, the Pacific. It became a reconnaissance aircraft painted in blue and pink. It was a bomber. It was a fighter. It served with over 30 nations, from Britain to France to America to Russia, from frozen airfields to desert heat. It was everywhere. The Spitfire was like a craze. like fidget spinners. That's what Spitfire was at its time. It was the craze of the pilots. Everyone wanted to fly one. There was a famous German pilot, an ace, once went and said to Goering himself, "I'll be happy when you give me a Spitfire, and only when you give me a Spitfire." Everyone wanted one. R.J. Mitchell never saw this. He never saw what his creation would become. He died in 1937. Before the Battle of Britain, before World War II, before any of this happened. Tens of thousands of workers, many of them women, built Spitfires by hand under constant threat of bombing, and they enjoyed every minute of their work. You could go and ask any one of them at the time, and they would have told you that they adored it. Because they knew that what they were building wasn't just a plane, it was a national effort. Today, a few Spitfires fly. There are quite a few, I must admit. There's a lot of them that are still going, because it is a British icon, and so many people want to see them fly. But there are still a lot of them out of the skies. We recently lost one, pilot Mark Long. He passed away in a Spitfire crash. But still, when people see these things fly, they stop, they look, they listen, because the Spitfire doesn't just represent the Air Force, it represents victory, it represents innovation under pressure, designed by function, defiance of against overwhelming odds. It is given proof that design, courage, and belief can change history. The Spitfire was never supposed to be a symbol, it was supposed to be a solution. But sometimes solutions become iconic. They become memory, they give meaning, and they become immortal. And that was the Spitfire. Although it was built as a temporary solution, it became a permanent part of life for some people. Thank you for watching.